Senator Warren, because it really was her idea and unflagging support of the CFPB that has brought us to this very happy day where we're a step closer to confirming Richard Cordray, which is a giant leap forward for consumer protection in the United States. I had the privilege of working with Chairman Johnson and others on the committee, including my colleague Senator Durbin, who was the majority whip, in making sure that this provision stayed within the mark and that we were able to come to a successful conclusion with Dodd-Frank. But today is a day in which we're really sort of on the verge of standing up and fully authorizing the CFPB. It took us a while to get here, but with a permanent director, we can regulate financial products from non-banks, including debt collectors, payday lenders, and check cashers. In fact, one of the points that we made is this is going to even the playing field. No longer will we have a regulated banking sector and an unregulated non-bank sector that could, in fact, pull in the opposite direction. We're going to have, we hope, consistent regulation that's going to be thoughtful, and I believe that is going to be the case. We have new mortgage rules, stronger oversight of Wall Street, and also the CFPB was organized really to play a major role, along with our other regulators, in preventing financial fraud, protecting responsible financial institutions, and ensuring fair competition. And most of all, and particularly, it was created to protect consumers. Protect them by educating them, protect them by regulating financial transactions, and doing that in a way that would provide a transparent marketplace that would benefit both consumers and businesses. Financial education has been one of their key areas of concern. They have been given rulemaking powers to not only educate the public, but also to preempt and head off unfair, deceptive, and abusive financial practices and products. It has already returned more than $425 million to consumers. 6 million consumers have benefited from the CFPB already. And I'm particularly pleased because I worked to incorporate within the CFPB the Office of Service Members Affairs, which is led by Holly Petraeus. And we are paying particular attention to the plight of the men and women of our armed services who many times find themselves, because they're away from home, at the mercy of financial operators who aren't as scrupulous as they should be. I learned that as a lieutenant and a captain in the 82nd M1 Division, counseling troops and trying to write letters to people, dunning them literally for loans they never should have been given in the first place. So that's one thing I'm very, very pleased to see take place. We are going forward with Director Cordray to not only seek input from the public, but also from financial services industry. One of the most refreshing things has been the reception by some business leaders to Richard Cordray, saying he's been fair, he's been transparent, that he has listened to us, that he has made appropriate changes, and that's the kind of regulatory environment that we want to continue. Not only has this Bureau shown it can be effective, but basically what it has done is demonstrated that a transparent, competitive marketplace is good for consumers and is good for businesses. And so we're very pleased today that we're on the verge of this formal confirmation. With that, let me recognize really the visionary who prodded us, inspired us, cajoled us, and today we should recognize her vision, Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Reid. I am delighted to stand here today with Senator Reid. It was nearly 4 years ago when I first came to see him with nothing more than an idea and a great sales pitch. How about if you take on some of the most powerful lobbyists in order to build an agency that would help a lot of families across this country? And Senator Reid said yes. And he was there from the beginning. He was there from the beginning in the design, and there from the beginning in fighting to get it through in the Dodd-Frank bill. And he also rightly pointed out it was his idea to put in an Office of Service Member Affairs. That's one of those little lines in a bill sometimes that you don't pay a lot of attention to. It turned into something amazing. Holly Petraeus now runs it. It has gotten homes back from service members who were cheated out of them. It's done a recent recovery for service members who were tricked on car loans. They're getting about $6.5 million back. It's been out there advocating, and it's been out there educating, provided a place for veterans, active duty folks to learn about their rights, to learn better about what that financial marketplace looks like. It's got a strong advocate in Holly Petraeus, and that's all there because of the leadership of Jack Reed. And so I'm just delighted to have a chance to say publicly how grateful I am. I also want to say how grateful I am to Senator Johnson, the chair of the Banking Committee, who so carefully, so patiently saw through a big and complicated Dodd-Frank bill and protected this consumer agency and made sure that we would get the strong watchdog that the American people deserve. It's been 2 years that Rich Cordray has been waiting for this vote, and now he's going to get it. We've got one more vote to go, but it is clear the consumer agency has survived. It has survived. This confirmation means that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is the law. It is here to stay. This confirmation means that the American people get the watchdog that they deserve. They get a watchdog that will help push tricks and traps out of the financial system, help get rid of the fine print, and help hold large financial institutions accountable. This confirmation means that big change is possible. Here in Washington, sometimes Goliath loses to David, and that's what's happened this time. So I'm very pleased to be here with you, Senator Reid. Glad to take any questions.
Any questions?
Yeah, Senator, so much of the debate over the last few years has been focused on Republicans demanding 3 significant changes to the CFPB in order to consider a nominee. Now that that fight has kind of been put to the sideline, is there any interest in potentially revisiting the CFPB to make more minor changes, changes that both parties might be able to agree on now that that kind of intractable debate has been set aside?
Well, I'm going to ask Senator Warren to comment also, but anytime we can improve an agency, we should do that. But the design of the CFPB was very similar to the financial regulatory agencies, particularly OCC, where you have a director. Their operations are essentially funded not through the appropriations process, but through the assessment process. And as a result, what you have is the ability and the independence to operate in the best interest, in this case, of consumers. So I think the overall design is something we feel very, very strongly about. But if there's any technical issues that can be improved, and with experience, I'm sure there will be, I think we'd be happy to consider them.
And I would only add to what Senator Reid said. He's right. Of course, you always want to consider any possible improvements to any agency, and the consumer agency is no exception on that. But we built a good, strong agency, and no one is looking to weaken it. And so I think we just stand firm there.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Can you describe if there was any speeches or any comments last night that really moved the ball forward, or what it was like in the room? And then how are things for the CFPB different today for consumers or for their customers, for the banks, with Cordray confirmed?
We'll let Elizabeth comment on. She's the
I'm going to let you comment on the room.
Well, my comments are very. The spirit of the room was a candid discussion, which, if we discussed publicly, would sort of undermine that spirit. And I think it's a good spirit that we should continue, not preempt. So let me then ask Senator Warren to comment upon where the CFPB is today versus vis-a-vis where it would be yesterday.
Any cloud of uncertainty hanging over the consumer agency has now disappeared. The consumer agency is here to stay in a strong form.
And I would add too, and something I think Elizabeth knows Richard better than I, but this is an extraordinary individual,
Yes.
a great public servant, somebody who has earned the respect of everyone who has had the privilege to deal with him, and indeed, as I suggest in my comments, the financial industry also. But we have someone, I think, who can build a strong organization based upon his skills. So I think we're doubly lucky. One, we have a director, but two, we have Richard Cordray as the director. So that's the point should be answered. Yes.
Senator Portman is introducing legislation that would create a dedicated Inspector General for the CFPB. Is that something that you would object to? Do you think it would gain support?
I think that's something, that we should look at. I mean, I don't have a predisposition either way. I think, first of all, what we want to do, and I think, again, I feel sort of, I'm next to the person who was the architect, so but I think our notion was, in order to have the kind of sort of gravitas and also effectiveness like the other banking regulators, they have to be built along similar lines. And so I'd be curious as to, what's the situation with Inspector General's OCC or FDIC, et cetera. But that's something that is in the process of a hearing we could easily undertake. So
there is one for the Fed. Is that sufficient?
That's the kind of data that we'll look for. And again, Senator Portman is a very thoughtful and experienced individual, and someone who's very serious, and someone whose proposals have to be considered seriously.
I think that's right. I think Senator Reid said it all.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
When you look back, what do you think the catalyst was for this to kind of get decided right now, being that it took 2 years? For Senator Warren, what do you think led to this moment?
Go ahead, Senator Warren.
I'd put it with two parts. One is, I think we've made the strong case for the consumer agency. No, I'll say that differently. The consumer agency has made the strong case for the consumer agency. It's now been there for 2 years doing the job. Recovering money from for families that have been cheated, providing a complaint hotline for people who've been tricked, protecting our service members, our seniors, our students. So it's been out there doing the job, and Richard Cordray has been out there doing the job. 2 years ago, when he and I stood next to President Obama in the Rose Garden, he was known for his terrific background, for having been a strong attorney general in Ohio, but no one knew what kind of director he would be for the consumer agency. We've had 2 years of Rich being a terrific director. And so I think that has been a powerful part of this conversation. I think it's fair to say that not only has the industry praised Rich, the community banks have praised him, the credit unions have supported him, consumer groups all around the country. But here's part of it. Both Democrats and Republicans have said that he is doing an excellent job. So I think that was a big part of getting us to where we are today. We now have information. We have facts. We've seen it work. It has worked.
Take a final question.
Do you think that there's more, that the agency and potentially Richard Cordray have more credibility because the nuclear option wasn't used to get it confirmed, or does that really not matter?
I think what matters, and again, I'll in many respects just echo what Senator Warren says, they've already established credibility, legitimacy, fairness with not only the consumers and the American public, but with the financial industry. When you get comments from the financial industry that they were sort of surprised at how open-minded, how thoughtful, how attentive they were to making their rules effective and efficient, that's a good sign. And then $425 million being returned to people, it's a practical benefit. So I think basically, and echoing again Elizabeth, the record that's been established, this is an agency that works. Mm-hmm. And now it's going to be fully the deployed and unquestioned in terms of its authority, and that's a good day for everyone.
It is. Actually, and I'll just add to that, you'll forgive me for 2 seconds being extra dorky here, but there really is an interesting point right in the heart of this. You know, when Congress passed Dodd-Frank 3 years ago, right now, there was a real concern among some about would the agency be able to do what it aspired to do. We knew what its intent was, and we built a structure we thought would work, but would it really take off? And so Congress took the position, the Senate did, of let's put a little belt and suspenders in this. We'll build the consumer agency, and we'll give the consumer agency the authority to write the rules on mortgages going forward. Remember, this economy was broken one lousy mortgage at a time. So the question of what to do in the mortgage market was probably the most central consumer issue of the moment. So they put a set of rules into Dodd-Frank saying if the consumer agency doesn't come up with rules, here's what controls. Here are the new rules, and these will go into effect automatically. Richard Cordray led the agency through the process of developing the rules for issuing new mortgages. They have been so widely applauded by consumer groups, by industry groups who say this helps us get to a cleaner, more honest mortgage market, a level playing field, as Senator Reid said, that essentially everybody wanted it. They said, don't go back to the Dodd-Frank rules. We like what this agency is doing. So that's just one more example. It partly goes to the answer to your question, too. The agency proved itself in multiple ways, and on the hardest task it was given, it proved within 2 years that it could do a darn good job on behalf of the American people.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you.